Hello everyone. This week we have another special guest out of our new series, Famous Artists That Have Wikipedia Pages. Just jokes aside, this time we have none other than Andy Park here. And I think a lot of you will know him, and he's currently director of visual development at Marvel Studios. That's some heavy stuff here. He's actually been a prolific artist in the entertainment industry in various areas over 2 decades. The first part kind of was like comic book illustrator, working with like Marvel, Dark Horse, DC Comics, and many more. Then he kind of got into video games and helped shape, I think, one of the biggest franchises out there in video games, God of War, and contributed to many, many different installments of that series. And then in 2010, he joined Marvel's new visual development department to help create the look and feel of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's going on until this day. And I think it's a Guinness Book of Records thing. He has worked on every single Marvel movie since 2010, and that's a lot. So anyway, without further ado, I want to give the mic to Andy. And of course, we want to know all about this stuff here, all about Andy and his career. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Jan. Thank you, Emmanuel, for having me. Oh, so you just want me to talk about
Yeah,
my...
so yeah,
You can go
tell
ahead.
us how it all started for you, Tell us
Yes, how did you get
whatever you
into it?
feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Well, I was born and raised in the States, right? So pretty much I was born in New York, but I was raised since I was 5 in Anaheim Hills, California. So I've been a native to SoCal all my life. And I think, I feel like a lot of, especially live action artists, when you hear about their story, they tend to talk about like Star Wars or Blade Runner or some movie that like impacted them when they're young. For me, it was different. Even though, yes, I loved Star Wars. I think the only one I saw in theaters was Return of the Jedi, and I had the toys, but I was really young, right? So for me, what left the most impression to me as a young little lad were cartoons, right? So growing up in the 80s and then the early 90s, like, before the dawn of the internet, was just watching cartoons. So I was really into like Transformers and G.I. Joe and Thundercats and Silverhawks and Robotech. Oh my gosh. Those are the ones that really left an impression on me where, I just would record them because, you couldn't buy them anywhere. Again, no internet. So I would try to record them on my VHS and try to pause it at the right moment, even though it was difficult because it would always kind of not stop where you'd want it to stop because I wanted to draw each of the Transformer characters, right? You see one in the background, and I'd get all the toys, and so I was a big cartoon guy. And then around, I think middle school, that's when I discovered, I've always known that they existed, but comic books, finding them in the drugstore, 7-Eleven, that kind of thing. There wasn't almost any like comic book stores that you could find. They're so rare. But discovering comic books kind of opened up my eyes to like, whoa, what is this? Like these amazing drawings and these stories. So in particular, I was a big Marvel Comics reader, and I would just once I discovered comics, I couldn't stop. I just tried to collect as much as I could with the little money I had, and I would draw them, I'd copy them. Eventually, you started collecting enough that you started to get to you recognize names of the artists, right? So one of the early ones was an Iron Man artist named Mark Bright and Bob Layton. And I still remember that first issue of Iron Man number 200 when I saw that in a new comic book store that opened up near my middle school. And that armor, it's called the Silver Centurion armor. That one just kind of, it's a new look to the traditional gold and red armor. This one was silver and red. And from that point on, I was like a diehard Iron Man fan. I collected everything, he did. Or that he appeared in, because he eventually went into an Avengers book called West Coast Avengers. Um, so yeah, and then eventually I discovered other artists like Alan Davis, um, and Mark Silvestri, and then there's this one guy that just impacted me more than any other. His name is Jim Lee. I'm sure you're aware of who he is, but you know, I didn't know he was a fellow Korean, right? I just thought he's a cousin of Stanley or something, right? Maybe I thought Stanley was Korean in the beginning, but eventually he would appear like in the Korean newspaper that my parents would get in the Korean newspaper, and then they knew I was a big Jim Lee fan, so they would cut out his little articles. I had a whole wall dedicated to him, a Jim Lee wall with his artwork,
Wow.
all that kind of stuff. So it was in high school that I really started like just everything I drew was Marvel, like Wolverine and Gambit, and I was a big in the beginning. I was really into Avengers, the comics, those characters like West Coast Avengers, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and then once I discovered X-Men, like that one really, really um, spoke to me because around that time, those were my teenage years, and X-Men was a little bit more adult, a little bit more serious and darker themes. So that just really kind of spoke to me. So I was all in on the X-Men. But yeah, I had a whole Jim Lee wall dedicated to him. So for me, the dream of drawing comic books was really big with me. But I remember that it was always a dream, but I always knew I like to draw and I have some level of talent because you know, you'd win a contest when you're young, when you draw, your friends see it and they compliment you, your parents compliment you. So you knew early on like, oh, there's something here. So I enjoyed it. And I dreamed of being a comic book artist, but I never knew if I'd ever be good enough to draw comics as a profession because it was so foreign. Like I don't know how you do anything professionally, right? I'm just a high school kid. And back then there's just a lack of information. So, I mean, I don't know. Were you guys comic book fans growing up?
Do you want
I
me to
mean,
go first?
yeah.
Actually,
Well,
so I grew up.
I'm
Yeah.
a I'm really sorry to say, but I was a DC guy, but I did
Oh,
read a
Oh
lot
let's
yeah,
of.
end the
Batman.
stream.
He's left.
I know.
Yeah. So I mean, I was a big DC guy, but I did, have a lot of comics. And I mean, I didn't even know about really Marvel comics until much, much
Oh,
later,
wow.
which is weird.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but I mean, I have pictures, of me, as a kid holding some of these coloring books and comic books and all this stuff, but there's all DC, and I was like, huh, how did that happen? But
Interesting.
yeah, that's me, Jan.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Germany, so for
Oh,
us, it was not the American comics.
yeah.
Um, I remember I grew up in a small town near Munich, and the first time I saw an American comic book was, I think I was already 15, 16, and it was only like in a specialty store in Munich
Mm.
that had these. But then what was everywhere were like the Franco-Belgian comics, like Tintin and
Yeah.
Asterix and this kind of stuff. Lucky Luke, I don't know if you know that guy. Um, those kind of things, very European, very French. Um, when I grew up, it was all the like like the very like cartoony kind of things, like
Yep.
comedy and action comedy, and then as I was getting older, like teenage years, I was venturing out into like the more central libraries in Munich, where they would have a lot more stuff, and that's where I kind of discovered like. And there's a lot of like gangster stuff in France, and then of course also
Oh.
Mobius. So that
Oh, yeah,
influence
yeah.
for me was a lot stronger. I never honestly like I knew Superman and Batman and Spider-Man and for me in 2008 when Iron Man came, I was like, who's that guy?
Oh,
And I
yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
no idea, right? And it was a big surprise. Anyway, yeah, that was it kind of for me, yeah.
I see, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, American comics it was, you know, especially during the 80s, like, I mean, it was obviously it was created decade before that, but everything was very muscly and all about muscles and the strong man and the might. But yeah, so also during that time I was really into like the Disney films, right? Like Little Mermaid and the gold, what did they call that, the golden age of the animation with the Beauty and the Beast. Aladdin was the one that really, really impacted me in high school. Um, and then so, but I dreamt of being a comic book artist. I graduated high school, you know, um, and then I went to UCLA and how um, I went in as an art major, right? So, but then I really was very ignorant because I went to that college not knowing what does that mean, art major. I like art, so I'm gonna learn how to do art. Because nobody in my family, I have no relatives that were artists, so no friends, so nobody knew it. My parents were like, I'm sure they were afraid. They're like, wait, you're not gonna become a lawyer or doctor? Like, but because I'm the youngest of three, I think they're more lenient. And my sister was already going to be a lawyer. My brother's going to go into business. So I went into UCLA and I quickly found out what art major meant, which is like fine art, right? So that was very quickly I realized I'm not a fine artist, like, because I remember in a particular class we were drawing a figure and I was like, yes, finally I get to learn how to do anatomy and draw the figure. So I did it as accurately as I could, and the teacher immediately came to me and said, what are you doing? Like, don't draw what you see, draw what you see, right? And I didn't know what that meant. I still don't know what that means. You just repeated the same sentence. But so in between my freshman and sophomore year, I went to, sorry, I should backtrack. Right before I went to UCLA, I went to my first San Diego Comic-Con. I'm sure you know what that is. I've heard of it, but I've never gone. I've never met a professional artist. I went there as as a teenager. I didn't have any artwork, anything. I just wanted to actually see real artists, and that was like a heavenly experience because all of a sudden I'm seeing these artists. It was way different than it is now. They didn't have anything called Artist Alley. It was just artists everywhere, right? And then I remember standing in front of these two artists that I'd never heard of. I don't know if you know these names, but his name is one guy's name is Aaron Weisenfeld, and another guy's name is Richard Bennett. They eventually ended up working for Jim Lee. Richard Bennett is currently a storyboard artist in film, and Aaron Weisenfeld became a fine artist. But I remember just standing in front of the table for literally 4 to 5 hours, and I was like this 18-year-old kid, and just watching them draw and being in awe. But I was so shy and introverted, I didn't even talk to them. And those two were apparently very introverted and shy. They didn't talk at all either. So I don't know what they were thinking, just little kid just standing there watching them the whole time. But so fast forward to UCLA, in between my freshman and sophomore year, I decided my friends think I'm good, my parents think I'm good. I have no idea if I'm any good. I need to go and get a critique from an actual professional. So I had my portfolio with literally only like 5 pages of sequential. I knew enough that you had to have sequential artwork to try to get work as a comic book artist. You can't just have pinups and pretty drawings. So I had my portfolio in hand and I went to San Diego Comic Con. By that time, Image Comics was all the rave. If you guys know what that is started by Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Mark Silvestri. It shook the whole industry, and I went into that portfolio review line. And the first review I went to, after waiting probably an hour or so, normally there's just like these editors that are looking at portfolios, and you have no idea who they are. But once I got into the front of the line, Rob Liefeld was doing the critiques, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that's one of the founders. He looked at my stuff, he had some comments, and then he offered me an internship. Wow. So I was like, what the heck is going on? Like I literally I didn't go there trying to find a job because I just wanted a critique to see what do I need to do. So that was a shocking moment. So to make a long story short, it took another 6 months of going back and forth, and he wanted me to do some. I visited his studio in Anaheim, and he would give me. He said you should work off of real scripts. Um, Obviously, I don't have access to that, so he gave me some real scripts, and then I would work on that, and then I was doing this while I was in an apartment in UCLA, and then I would try to make an appointment with him to try to show him the work that I did, but because he gave me a studio number, but I would call like every day, and for some reason, every time I called, they said, "Oh, Rob's in a meeting," and there was a point where I'm calling like literally hourly. Oh, he must be done now within an hour, and then so this was going on every single day, and I'm calling every hour. I don't know what the secretary was thinking, probably feeling so bad for me. But I found out that he was doing a signing at like Golden Apple at this comic book store in Hollywood. So I went there, you know, bumped into him, waited an hour for 2 hours for that, showed him my work again, or told, he saw me, he recognized me, and he was like, oh, he said, call me, and I'll like, I'll make another appointment for you to come by. So I said, okay, cool. Now he knows, and I did the same thing. I called again the next day, and wouldn't you know it, I went through that run around again for the next every hour for the next week or so. But then I found out he's doing another signing. So the following weekend in a store in Cerritos, I bump into him there again. He says the same thing. He's like, "Oh, just call me out." And I said, "Oh, but last time, and you weren't able to." He said, "You know what? Just come by the studio." So to show him the stuff. So I came by the studio, showed him my stuff, and long story short, eventually I did land that internship. They offered me the internship. I had to make the choice, drop out of UCLA, because and I was 19 years old, and I got thrown into a bullpen, which was on the 10th floor of this high rise right across the street from Anaheim Stadium, the baseball stadium, which was Anaheim Stadium at the time. And I was thrown into a bullpen full of like 20 plus young, early 20s, mainly males, right? Because this is comic books back in the 90s. And I started. Our job as an intern was to draw pinups. You're not going to be given any assignments. You just draw pinups of those characters that Rob has created and try to get noticed. So I would just do that every single day, and then you got to know like all the other artists. Like it was such a strange, fun experience. Like you hear about the bullpen in the heyday of Marvel with Stanley and all that. I don't know how similar it was. They were probably a little bit more professional than we were, because we were staying up until like 3 a.m. on a daily basis, going out to dinners and lunches, and it was just like essentially our college experience, right? There's a lot of crazy stories of that time. And eventually Rob saw a pinup that I did that he liked of this female character, and he offered me a book. So he's like, okay, you get to draw this upcoming book, which will be unnamed, but because I don't often name the first books I've done, because I was 19, and I look at it now and I'm like, how did I get a job? You saw something in me, but I was not ready. I honestly believe I was not ready to be a professional, like quality wise. I had the work ethic, but I was too green. But I think at that time there was just a plethora of like opportunities, because Image Comics was so big and anything they put out would just sell. So, I think Rob was putting out like 30 titles, so he just needed people to draw them. So I worked for Rob, which was called the studio is called Extreme Studios, and that was for about 2.5 years. I did that, which was an amazing experience. We'd go to conventions, around the US, and then we'd just be drawing every single day, hanging out, having fun with the other artists. And after 2.5 years, I had a weird inkling desire that crept up, where I'm like, okay, this is awesome. I'm living my dream, but as a comic book artist, I'm drawing with a pencil. Your title is actually penciler, right? So you're penciling, and then once you're done with the pencils, you hand it off to an inker. So an inker inks over you, and then after that, they give it to a colorist. They color over you, and then the book comes out. Um, to be honest, my experience of that was kind of rough because when I first got that gig, I was inked by one of the veterans of this. You know, he was actually Rob Liefeld's inker, you know, choice inker. So he was, you know, amazing. A guy named John Sabal. Once I got the book, Rob gave me to an inker who has never inked a book yet, but this is going to be his first time inking a book, right? So just like he probably felt like, oh, why do I have to ink this newbie? You know, then I feel the same way. I get to have to be inked by a newbie as well. So it's like two newbies being joined together. The product is, I don't know. I don't know if you guys ever experienced somebody else working over your artwork, but it's a strange experience that I guess wasn't, it was kind of shell shock. I wasn't ready for that because I was like, oh, you know, I especially at that point, since of my lack of skill, I need an inker to make me better, you know? But that wasn't the situation. So that I think I mentioned that because I was just doing pencils throughout that whole time, and I started having a desire to like, wait, even though I enjoy doing comic books, like I don't know how to color, I don't know how to paint, I don't know how to do any other medium, I don't understand color theory, I've never touched paints, like traditional paints, but I want to, like I want to know more about quote unquote art. So I actually made a decision that I wanted to take a hiatus from my whatever beginning of my the beginnings of my comic book career, and I wanted to go to an art school. So I I found a semi-local like art school, it's Art Center College of Design, which is in Pasadena, California. Um, which was strange. I didn't know it existed until I went to UCLA. But um, so I applied there. And so, but this is proof that my comic book work wasn't great. I remember I made an appointment with the admissions counselor, and I showed him, here's my professional artwork. I didn't have any attitude whatsoever, but I just showed him. He just, oh, show me your portfolio. I showed him my comic book work and everything. He took one look at it and everything. He's like, yeah, you need to you need to go to a community college and take some life drawing classes.
Oh man!
I was like, oh, okay. There's confirmation that I'm no good.
Wow, that's
I can't even get my work's not even good enough to get into an art college. So,
Even
but
though
I
it's
did.
professional work. Oh my God.
Yeah. But I don't disagree with him. It was, you know, and that is one thing you know, that I feel like, you know, when it comes to the art world, like I mentioned UCLA and, you know, draw what you see, you know, not what you see kind of thing. There is a tier of like, where does, now obviously fine art looks at commercial art and looks down on it. But even within commercial art, there's a range of like, here's whatever film, here's, I don't know, live action or feature animation. And the really low on the scale tends to be comic books, unfortunately. I don't feel that way, but I've noticed that. Like, you know, there's some kind of weird perception of comic books. Um, so I did that. I went to a community college and took a life drawing class, and that became my portfolio, and I got in. So yeah, I went to Art Center as an illustration major, and then there I finally got to like, I got to draw what I see, and got to they helped me like draw what I'm seeing, meaning the anatomy and form and gesture and color theory. And you know, I learned gouache and watercolor, oil painting. I was doing classes that are called head drawing, head painting. I was like, this is exactly what I want, right? Um, yeah. So I did all that for 2 years. I had one more year to graduate. I got a call from another image founder, a guy named Mark Silvestri. Well, it was actually, uh, I don't know what his title was, editor-in-chief. His name was Matt Hawkins, who works for Mark Silvestri's Top Cow Productions. And they got the rights to Lara Croft's Tomb Raider. So they were going to do a comic book based on her, which there has never been a comic book in the States based on her. And at that time, like Tomb Raider was, huge, really, really well known. So they offered me that book, and I was like, oh crap. Like it was one of those opportunities where like I couldn't turn it down.
Mm.
So I dropped out of college again. So I always say like I'm a two-time college dropout, but at the end of the day, you guys know I've hired people through the years, whether it's been or I've helped hire people through the years, whether it's Sony at Marvel. It doesn't matter, like we look at the resume, but not really. You really just look at their portfolio. So yeah, I did Tomb Raider. I started drawing Tomb Raider. I went back into comic books, did that for another 2.5 years, which was an amazing um, experience because the first book came out and it was the number one selling book in all of comic book in the industry. And I have no illusions that had anything to do with me. I knew it obviously because of Tomb Raider, but that was a big reason why I took the book because I knew that it would, put me on the map, so to speak, in the comic book industry, right? So I drew from issues 1 through 20. So it was a long run, and it was very proud of that because it's tough. It's tough to do. Each issue that you do is like 22 pages of sequential storytelling, plus you do a cover, and you're doing this month after month. I got to go on a lot of different tours. The first time I went to Europe was because of Tomb Raider, when Tomb Raider #1 came out, and I went to Netherlands, Germany, Paris, and France. And that's where I discovered what is Tintin and what are these things called albums. And I was like, holy crap, like these things are amazing and they're all painted and the artist does everything. What is this? So I remember coming back from that trip with like, I think I had to ship a full box of everything because I was like, look at this person named Wendling and all these. I still have all the books. I don't remember all their names, but yeah. So I did Tomb Raider for 2.5 years, 20 issues, and then I had another inkling, like I'm just penciling for the next 2.5 years after doing art center, learning color and loving color and painting. So I'm like, oh, I miss being able to do full illustrations, right? So I was trying to learn digital painting at that time. There weren't a lot of resources to learn how to do that. But I started off with a program called Painter before knowing how to paint in Photoshop. And then around this time, like the internet was then definitely flourishing and you're getting to see concept artists online. Not a lot, but in particular, I do remember seeing Justin Sweet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his website, and even though it's like his images were only like this big, but they were like masterpieces, right? Like there was no zoom at that time. But I was like, wow, he's doing these full illustrations and designs, and he's doing it digitally, but they look like paintings. I'm like, I want to do that. That looks awesome, right? So I started to build a portfolio again, just like I had to build a portfolio for comic books. I had to build a portfolio just to get into art school. Now I'm building a portfolio to get into concept art. So I was doing that while I was drawing comic books. I was doing Tomb Raider. Eventually, I left Top Cow and I started working at Marvel Comics, and I started doing like X-Men, like covers. One for I was like the cover artist for Excalibur, for Weapon X, and right when I was about to leave, I got the call then saying, "Hey, do you want to do a couple fill-in issues for Uncanny X-Men with Chris Claremont writing it?" And I'm like, oh crap! Like I was already on my way out to really focus on getting to concept art, but that is like a bucket list thing, right? Chris Claremont, iconic X-Men writer, and X-Men was always my favorite. So I paused for a second and I drew like a 3-issue arc of Uncanny X-Men, which was amazing. But I also learned by doing that how much harder it is to do a team book than it is to do a solo character book. Because, doing a book like Tomb Raider, one character, there might be her fighting somebody else, but usually you're one or two characters per panel. When I'm doing a team book, oh my gosh, there's like 6 characters in every panel. Like, whew, that's really hard. Okay, so, and then I needed to build up my portfolio, so I was doing stuff on the side, but I also knew the best way to accelerate building just amount of pieces is to take a class. So I found a character design class at Noman School in Hollywood, and a guy named Kevin Chen and a guy named Anthony Francisco were teaching the class. So I took that class for 10 weeks, built a good amount of pieces from there. And at the end of that class, Kevin was gonna, he said he was gonna have a gallery show of all our pieces. That's our final at Gallery Nucleus. So I treated that as like my senior, like graduating. So, you have your name, you can set it up however you want. And then Kevin invited a bunch of industry friends to come and check it out, right? So it's like a great opportunity. And it was at that gallery show that I met a guy named Charlie Wen. So and then he told me, he works at Sony Santa Monica, and they're actually looking for someone to work on God of War 2, second in their franchise. So I was able to land a interview there. I also, funny enough, right around that same time, I went to the signing of Star Wars artists like Ian McKay and Ryan Church and Feng Zhu were doing a signing over in Pasadena. And I met Feng Zhu, and he also wanted to interview me. He had a new design studio with James Klein at that time. So it was kind of at the same time, I had an interview with Feng and as well as with Sony Santa Monica. But after getting that interview, I was able to land a job with Sony Santa Monica. So I started working on God of War 2 in 2010. And that was my intro into the world of concept art, which is, I would say, diametrically different than the 10 years that I was doing comic books. It was like a massive culture shock. And I don't know if I've ever gotten over it. I think I'm still dealing with it because I always tell, I have tons of peers in the comic book world that I still, will see every year at Comic-Con. But the world of comic books versus the world of concept art is so different. Both very challenging, plus and minuses to both. But yeah, concept art is tough.
What are some of the big, contrasts, pros and cons? I mean, what were they for you?
Comic books, the great thing about comic books is you have essentially a month to do a book, right? So 22 pages plus a cover, and you're left alone. You can, you work, you're all freelancers, so you work from home for the most part. There's no more studios out there that you can go to. And then you set your own schedule as long as you hit the deadline, and I was always very good at like I'm gonna hit the deadline. Like I'm that guy. I'm not gonna slack off. I'm not gonna wait to the end. I'm not a procrastinator. And then you're good, right? But I'm not a fast artist. So for me to do one page usually took me average 12 to 15 hours to finish a page. So it's many, many hours to try to finish to hit that deadline. So that's the challenge there. But as long as you hit it, and then the other ones about what I said about like, then somebody else inks you, somebody else colors you. Depending on who you are and who you get, I always feel like it's tough because like I feel like a lot of us are this way, but I'm definitely more of a control freak. So if I'm gonna be spending that much time in my art, like I want to see it through. Like I want to, finish the artwork. So I think the whole concept of somebody else inking you and coloring has never fully set well with me. Even though I'm very proud of the stuff that I did, and I had amazing inkers and colorists that worked with me, especially in particular on the Tomb Raider stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still not 100% how I would do it, right? So that's the challenge in comic books. Concept art, you guys know this one, is what I tell my comic book peers is, imagine if you spent a month drawing that issue, but you're doing that knowing that your coworker is also doing that same issue, drawing that exact same pages, exact same, book from that writer. And at the end of the day, they're going to show the editor or the director, and at end of 30 days, and they're going to choose which one goes to print. That's kind of like our job, right? Because, we're designing things, but you're not the only one designing it. They need to see a breadth of, variations, different voices to help find the director's vision, right? That's the other thing, right? We're trying to find somebody else's vision. Of course, our voice is there, but at the end of the day, it's not ours. It's not our, baby. We're part of it, helping raise the baby, I guess, but we're not the parents, or I don't know. That's a horrible analogy, but you know what I mean?
Makes sense.
So yeah, that part, I think that was the culture shock that I had in Sony, because the first month I was there, I remember we were working on a boss character, one of the Sisters of Fate, and I remember mine and this other artist named Dwayne Turner got traction. So both of us were working on it for 30 days, and we were literally meeting with the director, like, I want to say, like, on a daily basis. So he'd look at both of ours, and he'd like something from mine, like something from his. He wouldn't just like pick one so that person could just continue. He just had us working on it for 30 days, both of us. And at the end of the day, it was like almost like the same thing with slight differences, right? But I'm still putting in like 12, 15 hours days at that time. I remember I was working, full days at the studio, driving to Sony Santa Monica, and I'd come home and I'd still be painting into the night to try to just keep up in this new career that I'm doing. And at the end of the 30 days, the director couldn't decide. He had us print out both pieces, put it on the wall, taped on the wall, and he had our team of VizDev artists vote. and then I remember it's like a reality show. Like, one person picked his, one person picked mine. Eventually it was like down to like 3-3, and it came down to one person's vote, and
oh my God,
Dwayne's got picked, right? So I just remember walking down the stairs when we were done with that meeting, and I was talking to Charlie after that, being like, is this what's going to be like every single assignment I get? Because I was like, what have I done? I've made a huge mistake in my career.
That's pretty brutal. Sounds really brutal.
It was brutal. And of course, as you guys know, that's not how every single assignment is treated.
No, I mean, that's never ever happened to me.
Oh, really?
Like, there were times, when I was at like Image Movers, and I was working with Doug, that we had a big art department. So he would have a couple of us take a crack at, one kind of, one set or something, or painting. But, most of the time, when you're in, working with a PD, you're doing that and you're doing that, and
really,
very rarely, maybe very early Blue Sky phase, we all took a stab at something.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time they like to divide it because, it's just money, they don't want to spend, have 3-4 artists doing the same thing. They just want everybody, I don't know, Jan, if that's happened to you, but not a lot to me.
I have for me, it would be a different kind of pet peeve I have where, like, it's due to, I guess, how movies are made these days. And Andy, you probably know better than anyone that, like, you start illustrating, you start like very early on drawing stuff when there's only like a treatment, not even a script. And then we often like develop scenes or entire environments for months at a time, only for then suddenly like, oh yeah, that's not going to be in the movie. Bye. And then like a couple of months work is just like poof gone. That's another one. Like I mean,
Yes.
it's just how it is. But like,
Yes.
yeah, that's not nice, right? That's not nice. Not a good feeling.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a difference in like because I work in Marvel's visual development team, and as you guys know, our focus is on the characters. So my experience in designing characters for film, there's almost never a case where one person is only working on a character. Like it's always multiple people. Like because
That's interesting.
yeah, because you need to see just they just want to see as many variations
Yeah.
of like a let's say speak of a costume. If it's a
Oh, okay.
if it's a character like Thor, they're not gonna just want have one take and one voice. They want like
Mm.
as many variations as they can. Like when we're doing like Hela, like like the whole there's so many times, very often where the whole team takes a stab at it, right? And I've heard that for yeah, so I think maybe it's a character thing. I'm
Well,
sure
it's
vehicles
funny.
are that way too, right?
It's funny because I mean I have like in my library I have like a lot of Marvel art of books, which is one of the things that are really good about Marvel. And I always wonder, I was like, wow, like, oh, this guy did that. Oh, but that guy did that, and it's all the same, but all their own takes. And I found it to be, quite interesting,
Yeah.
because it doesn't happen in live action really. When I mean, all the films I worked on, I don't think that's really ever happened. But what's interesting is Jan has worked on some Marvel
Mm-hmm.
shows. I've worked on some Marvel shows,
Yeah.
and we always wondered. I mean, I always wondered. I'm like, this is really weird. Like, I feel like, we're like the live action portion, and then but there's always this tie-in because the production designer will always come back and go, yeah, Marvel doesn't like or the meeting didn't go well, or it went well, whatever,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it's like it's like this separated thing,
Yeah.
and it took me a long time to understand, like, hey, this is weird. Why don't we all work together? Until I found out that uh, literally it's what you guys do there is more character and story based,
Yep.
and what we're doing is kind of just the live action portion of the sets,
Yep.
really.
Yep.
So that
Yeah.
was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure the experience at Marvel is a unique one because our department doesn't exist outside of Marvel.
I mean, do
So
you guys ever wonder, like, does the live action stuff ever come over to your desks, and then you kind of go, oh yeah, good, bad, like, because we, when it goes to the PD and the PD goes to the meeting, and then the director has the meeting with, I guess, Kevin Feige or other people, we always, like, I'm just asking out of myself because I always wonder, like, who sees it, like,
yeah.
who do you guys even see what we do?
I mean, the leader, I'm for the movies that I supervise. I'm in those meetings, so it's all the
Ah, okay, okay.
it's all the heads of the departments. So the production designer, the costume designer, VFX supervisor, myself, directors, producers. It's
Yes.
a I kind of call it a circus because it's a room of 30 to 50 people.
Wow.
And I go in there, and a lot of times you don't know who everyone is because there's always assistants and but you know who the heads of the departments are, and it's the opportunity for everyone to see. We're presenting our characters, then the costumes are presenting their costumes, and then the production designers showing their stuff. So it's mainly those three departments showing, occasionally VFX, but mainly those three. That's where I'll see all your work and everything, and always like in awe of the art department stuff because that's not the stuff that we do, right? We're more aligned with the costume design or doing the characters and all that kind of stuff, and we'll do keyframes, but our keyframes are very different than the ones that you guys do, because you guys are doing ones to show this is what the environment's going to look like, and you might have a character in there, but when we do keyframe, the characters are paramount. We're trying to capture a moment in the film, so it's more of a feel thing than it is descriptive, right? So I always think of our keyframes as more like how you would see a comic book cover, because it's to sell the movie more than describe to a department head or, how this is going to be made, right? So, yeah, but those meetings are nerve-wracking, very nerve-wracking.
I was
Yeah,
wondering.
I've had many times where they come back and they go, yeah, like didn't go well, and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't get told more than that, because it's
Oh,
kind of like, and I'm always the kind of artist that's like, well, can you tell me more so I can understand, how to do it better, or what direction to do it. But it was, I guess now I kind of understand more. It's probably a lot of people talking. Even directors, they were saying it's a very different dynamic because the director wasn't making the calls, because it's a group thing as opposed to like on like a film like Superman. It was James was making the call.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it's just interesting to me. That's all.
It really comes down to like, because at the end of the day, it is the director that is in charge, but they're in the room knowing that the studio, Kevin Feige, is the big kahuna, right? But so it really depends on the director that comes in, right? So a director like Taika Waititi or James Gunn, they're gonna have a little bit more, I don't know if command is the right word, but they know more what they're looking for,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm,
And
mm.
then that's why it's always interesting seeing the dynamic, because usually when it's a newer director, they come in and they're like, you could tell they're not sure, just like you're saying, of this dynamic, like it's a little different and odd how they're used to working. So I feel for them too, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it must be so nerve-wracking for them to navigate this, um, especially when there's just so many voices in that room, right? But at the end of the day, it's the Kevin and and then the director that are leading the charge. But it really is the director, you know. And Kevin's very good at letting the directors lead the charge, um, and then we're there to like present our work, and and then you'll get comments from the director, from whoever, from Kevin, from other people who will chime in. And it's my job to kind of extrapolate all that and to kind of figure out, because not always like 100% clear to kind of what you're saying, but that's where you try to, if you can have another meeting just to follow up, to be like, to clarify. You can talk to a producer as well. And then you kind of go back. I'll talk to the artists and kind of go over like what was said, what the notes are, what they're looking for, and then I'm trying to read all that to be like, yeah, I could see that the director's his sensibilities are this, or he's leaning more to he's more into like the grounded stuff, that word that we love to hear all the time, grounded, right? But then someone like Taika comes in and shakes things up, and you're like, oh, grounded is not a word that he's interested in. So
Yeah.
he went the other way. But yeah, it is interesting to just see just all the dynamics of all that, and just that aspect of filmmaking, I think is very interesting to witness. But and then I get a glimpse into the art department, what you guys are um, you know dealing with, and then I will get to interact with the production designer, and kind of like on Thunderbolts, talking to Grace and just seeing what going into the offices and what you guys are working on. It's always inspiring. It's always so interesting, but it's all different because directors dealing with them, with all the sets, the environments, the vehicles. Ours, very character centric. So yeah, going back to that point, like yeah, there's always multiple artists for every character. So and it always takes so long just to get and a buy off on any character. Like it's you wouldn't think so. And at the end of the day, like each artist is so freaking talented. Like if they could pick, for me, I'm like I almost feel bad for the director. Not really, but because you're like it's it's an embarrassment of riches where like if you pick that one versus this one, like either one's gonna be good. Either one's gonna make the film like shine, but it really just comes down to what the director's subjective, like what he wants, right? It's not about like what's better or what's not better, you know? It's really he's trying to find we're helping him find his vision. And they don't always know it, as you know, right? So we're helping them to figure that out. And those are always the toughest ones where they're like they might not say it, but you can kind of tell like they'll know it when they see it. That's always hard, you know? Because then you try to get information from them. They'll say words, but they don't, you kind of figure they don't really know. And then others like really know. There could be challenges with that too, when they like either think they know or they're not giving you room to explore what the possibilities are.
I mean, obviously you're supervising now. Do you still make art? Like,
Yeah, I guess that's one difference that yes. I mean, that's what makes my job extra challenging because I'm art directing, supervising, but I'm also doing the work. So there are many days through the years because I've been supervised since 2015 on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But there's so many days where because I'm going to meetings or I'm meeting with the artists, I'm art directing whatever, or dealing with emails, whatever I'm doing on the phone, that it's like 4 o'clock p.m. and I'm like, crap, I haven't touched my Wacom pen yet. So what we say is like I haven't worked yet, even though I have all day long.
right.
But as an artist, it feels like I haven't done my work because I almost feel like your main job is to design. So it's weird because I feel like I'm kind of doing two jobs. Because when I see like not to denigrate at all what a production designer or costume designer does, obviously they have a lot of things I don't have to do. But most don't. Tell me if I'm wrong. They're not in the trenches like fully drawing. They might be doing paint overs or giving direction, but they're not just sitting there designing that set, or the costume designer's not sitting there for a week designing that one costume, right?
No.
So, but that was set up through Ryan Meinerding, who's the head of visual development, and Charlie Wen. So they're the ones who they're the ones who created this department, right? Because Ryan in particular was integral from the very beginning in Iron Man 1. And then on Captain America, and then Iron Man 2, and then eventually he brought on Charlie, who was integral on Thor, and then through that, the producers recognized, oh wow, these two guys are something special, and they are. So they decided to like, hey, why don't you to work here full time and start a visual development department, hire on some artists. So lucky for me. I was the first person they hired back in 2010. So I told you about my origin story. So it's almost like it's meant, for me, obviously it's a dream job, right? Because I was a Marvel, kid reading Marvel comic books, dreaming about doing Marvel comic books or being a comic book artist. And then in contrast to you, Jan, when I saw Iron Man in the theaters, I knew exactly who that was, and it was a dream come true seeing that character come alive on screen in that fashion. Because I always knew of Iron Man, I knew the world wasn't totally familiar, but it's one of those like, can you do an Iron Man justice? Like, is the technology good enough? Will you believe that a guy can go into a suit and and it, when you watch the movie, you're like, yes, yes. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Was it for you like, were you like again on the phone, like calling Ryan Meinerding every hour to get on to Marvel, or did he call you first, or Charlie call you first?
Well, no, this is why like everything was like serendipitous, or just like, man, Wow. Like, cause I told you about how I got into Sony Santa Monica,
Mm.
right? So I was working there under Charlie, and then a couple years into my stay at Sony, this new guy came into the doors with his portfolio in hand named Ryan Meinerding.
Mm.
He was looking for some freelance work. Um, and I never heard of, none of us heard of this guy. And then when he showed us his portfolio, all of us were absolutely floored. Like to this day, I still say I think it was like the best portfolio I've ever seen, right? Like to the point it made us depressed. One of those.
What
I
was
think
so
you've all
good
seen
about
that,
it?
right? Huh?
What was so good about it?
Because at that time it was like I don't know 2007 or something like that. He had two full portfolio, 13 by 19. One that size 13 by 19 is like bigger than a normal portfolio, and there were full character designs. Each character, back then, if you remember character designs, they're kind of sketchy, loose indications of what a character will look like. Or they're just like T-pose, like, characters. They're not really that impressive. He was doing these character designs that looked like they were painted by Norman Rockwell. Like the faces have personality. They're rendered to that level where it's like a full
Mm.
illustration, not just a concept design. So, with full on textures, like every texture was described. You knew that was leather. Like, normally like when you see yeah, even the art of Star Wars, which is amazing, but it's sketchy still, right? And you kind of can guess that that's probably cloth. That's, but his was like you knew exactly what it was. So it was just, and then he would do keyframes that were just, I don't know if you've ever seen his like John Carter of Mars or keyframes that he did back in the day. They look like Norman Rockwell illustrations, and you just didn't see concept art at that
Mm.
level. So he worked with us just for 2 months. But and then he went off and did John Carter of Mars, and through doing John Carter of Mars under John Favreau, that's how he got on noticed and got onto Iron Man. Um, so yeah, so when Charlie and Ryan were forming the team, I was good friends with Charlie, and Ryan was an acquaintance, but I didn't see him much, but it was Charlie who gave me the call. They knew I wanted to work there, but how I honestly felt was like I think they know how much I love Marvel. They know I'm a comic book guy, but I'm the type that didn't wouldn't like put it on them to say, hey, hire me, hire me, hire me. Because I also have like the imposter syndrome thing at that, especially at that time of like, ooh, those guys are on this level. Like, I don't know. And this is film. For me, film always felt like, whoa, that's the cream of the crop. Like, so I felt like eventually, that's what I would say at the time. Eventually, I'll work in film. But, maybe that art center um, recruiter like made me insecure.
Well, I mean, you certainly made it there. I mean, as one of the basically one of the first group. I mean, how big is the group now?
For the longest time, it was always a group of like about 6 people.
Mm.
Oh.
Now it's about, I want to say 11, 12 artists. Yeah. But for a long time, it was just 6 of us. It was a pretty small group, but I would say that it was 6 core full-time members, but we always were hiring freelancers. So for every film I led, I was able to hire like a handful of freelance artists. So, um, yeah.
Interesting. I mean,
Wow.
so I think one of the big questions for me is like you're taking on like you're pulling from such a rich history and rich pool of like art on like with the comic books with everything that Marvel made over the decades, right? Um, and there's like a built-in fan base at this point that is very, I guess, vocal and very passionate about each character and each storyline and everything, right? I mean,
Oh
how do
yeah.
you go about like it's a very special problem also to translate whatever is in the comics onto the big screen. And I was just wondering, like, how is that for you? What are the interesting points, the difficulties in making that translation, and like what do you always have to be very like focused and cautious about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think um it is a particular challenge. I mean, it's funny because like, there's been times when you would meet somebody who's not familiar with concept art and they would say like, wait, but what are you designing? It's just from the comic. So you have some people who don't just like, don't you just make that? But most people aren't like that. But the challenge, I feel like the challenge, especially in the first whatever 10 years of working on the MCU projects, we're digging from the origins of Marvel comic books, like the 60s and 70s, like those comic books. And those comic book characters, they all had like a very similar sensibility, the design sense of that time by like amazing artists like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, all the, and they all have the underwear on the outside. They have kitchen or pirate boots and pirate gloves, right? Um, and then they have some kind of mask, right? And they're all essentially naked, but just with lines to delineate where the glove begins, where the shirt ends, and then you could see their full anatomy, right? Which is part of the appeal because you can see every single rib, every striation, but that's what makes it look so cool. And yet they're wearing clothes. But at the end of the day, you realize they have to draw so much, and especially with my experience in comic books, you have to draw panel after panel, same character over and over again, like in every pose. Like if you were to draw that with like intricate, even what I'm wearing now, panel after panel, that'd be hard. But to just draw essentially a naked body and just draw lines to show where the stripes are and the stars here makes it much easier, right? Also to show the power. Like at the end of the day, a life drawing, figure drawing, that's where you see the ultimate power. Um, a nude life drawing, what I'm saying. You see the tension of the body, all that stuff. But so it's that's why even when I'm designing a character, I'm doing for any character I've ever designed, I'm doing, up to like a dozen or more designs options. I'm trying to do a full range. On one side is the full-on comic accurate look, and then as you go further to the right, more and more grounded, right? Because we're trying to ride that line of these are characters that could exist outside your door, and if the audience were to see them, they wouldn't laugh because traditionally comic books are seen as laughable for kids. When we've seen them in the past in live action TV shows, even though a lot of it's cool, but like you have the Adam West Batman, there was an old Spider-Man live action, Hulk, Wonder Woman, all these things. They're cool for their time, but even I knew as a kid that Adam West's Batman was like, oh, it's kind of goofy, but it's kind of cool too. But you never think,
Pretty much
oh, they're
goofy.
real. Yeah, you don't think they're real, right?
Pow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kaboom.
the times when you saw them felt real was like Tim Burton, but it's still stylized, right? You're like, oh, stylized, that's cool. So MCU has always been riding that line of like, this is not stylized like Tim Burton fantasy. It's pretty as real as you can get while still being true to the kind of the spirit of the comic. And I think that's what Iron Man did so well because any of these comic book movies, including our designs, can so easily go into camp, right? That's where the challenge is. How do you not get into like where an audience member will see it and laugh, and versus like trying to be true to the spirit of that design. And so that's where the challenge is, and we do all the designs, and then it's up to each director as well as Kevin and everyone to like say where do we like it on that spectrum. And for
wonder,
me,
like, yeah, I wonder, is there like many reels of like actors in really terrible spandex costumes with like outtakes where like, nah, we can't do that kind of stuff?
well, that I would say is usually like the early fittings of the costume, right?
Yeah, I know.
Because they're not done yet. So if you were to see those early, versions, like I could see why there would be fear because it's not finished yet, right? So it just looks it's in that campy, goofy because you're wearing something that someone would never wear, right?
I know, right?
So yeah, so I think what are they saying about yeah, so like I think one of the early ones was like Ant-Man, right? Like that one was like a big challenge because if you guys are familiar with the comic book look of Ant-Man, he's like on the side of like very even me as a comic book reader back in the day, I was like, oh, that guy looks so goofy because he's got this like bulbous helmet with these little antennas. It's got this red costume. It never looked cool, right? Even as a kid, I was like, that's not cool. Like those other characters, other Iron Man looks cool, but Ant-Man did not look cool. So taking on that one was like, okay, how do I stay true to the spirit of that character, but make it palatable to today's audience? But the extras, and then you have to take the story into account, right? And whenever we're designing anything, knowing that Hank Pym in the 60s made this suit. So I was like, okay, I got to dig into a retro feel. So doing research into like astronaut suits and that kind of old tech, was so much fun. And then working at that time with Edgar Wright, and then eventually Peyton Reed. Yeah, and then it just comes down to the approval process of trying this, and they respond to that, and you know,
You
but
know
yeah,
that that was one of the movies where I was like, I was telling my friend, he was like, hey, want to go watch Ant-Man? And I was like, I don't want to go watch Ant-Man. That thing is goofy as hell.
yep,
And I was like, there's no way you're going to convince me that that's going to be a cool character. And but we had nothing to do, so I was like, all right, fine.
yeah,
I still remember, okay, I was very begrudgingly going to watch this, and then I came out of the theater going, okay, well, good job, because
yeah,
I just could not believe someone could make it cool.
yeah. No, me too. Me
I just
too.
like, because Iron Man is he
Inherently cool.
inherently cool and has a lot of character, right? He
Hmm.
had a lot of internal struggles. There was something that grabbed you because I worked on the first Iron Man as well, but
Mm.
in a VFX side.
Oh,
But I read the comics just to prepare for it, and I was like, wow, this is actually pretty good,
yeah.
like writing. And but you could see how it would be cool.
Hmm.
Thor, uh, you know, I mean, the other one was, Captain America. It just looks really funny in some of the
Yeah,
Marvel,
yeah, yeah,
and I was like, I don't know how. And then I see what you guys do, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see, and
yeah.
Ant was the ultimate. I was like, all right, all right,
Totally. I mean, that's where I've had so much respect for, the leadership at Marvel and Kevin in particular. Like, what, the fact that I've been witness and part of it, but I give credit to them, obviously, but what they've been able to do, taking these things that are not obvious at all, like it's not obvious that these are going to be winners by any means, but the big experiment was, leading up to the Avengers. Obviously, each one had to do well, and you got to believe that you believe the science of Iron Man. You have to believe that Captain America, because Captain America for me was always like kind of goofy too. Like in the comic, I was never really into the Boy
Mm.
Scout, and then that movie was great. And then now you got to believe. So you believe science. Now you got to believe that there's a God out there in space. And like, oh crap, how do you? Those are very disparate things. But when they pull that off, you're like, oh my gosh. And then the
Yeah,
big experiment was Avengers. You know,
yeah,
it sounds like novel now, but back then to have like these
Mm.
seven or six, seven main characters joined together was like unheard of. So the fact that that did well, but then soon after that, they told us that we're going to work on Ant-Man. I was like, oh, okay, that's where my job will cease to, exist. But then, also right around that time, they're like, we're going to work on Guardians of the Galaxy. And I was like, Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
that's the
Okay.
other one.
Yeah.
Mm.
My friend was working on it, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm working on this thing called Guardians of the Galaxy, and there's this talking raccoon." And I'm like, in a tree, and I'm like, "What the?" I'm like, "Man, Marvel's really going down and all this stuff." And it comes out, I'm like, "Damn, I wish I worked on it."
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was crazy. But both those films, I remember me and my coworkers were kind of like, okay, we're having fun, but this could be the end because it's just too risky. And I was like, I remember being surprised, like, why would they, after the success of Avengers and Iron Man, like, why would you take a risk in doing something so daring? But that shows you why I have so much respect because
Mm.
they had, they went for it.
Yeah.
They were not, you don't see that, enough, right? That kind of
What
boldness.
was the most, your claim to fame, the thing that you love to work on the most, of all your time there? Is there
Oh, that's always hard because like each one is so special for different reasons, right? Like working on the Avengers film, I was like, that one was like the pinch me throughout the whole production. I'm like, there literally been times when I'm working there. I remember I was in the office by myself at that time, and I would have to stop every once in a while, being like, oh my gosh, I'm working on an Avengers movie. I was like, I can't believe it. That's crazy. Like, I don't know if it's gonna be good, but the fact that I'm working on an Avengers movie, that there's
Yeah.
actually, yeah, that one was special. Um, um, Ant-Man was special because that was the first like titular character I got to design, like the main character I got to design. So that was really special. And then of course, once I became a leader, well, still, another one right before I became leader was Captain America: Civil War. That one, but I was taking on more of a leadership role at that time. Um, so I was intimately involved. That's when I started going to the meetings with Ryan.
Mm.
So then I got to see the scary
The
meetings.
50
I'm like, oh,
people.
yeah, but that was my training ground of like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's very different than like video games and like directors in video games just come to your desk and look at your stuff and
Mm.
it's more collaborative or whatever, easier that way. And then on Civil War, I got to go on set. I flew to what's it called, Atlanta, and got to see the airport scene where they're like charging towards each other. So me as a worker, but as well as the fanboy inside of me, seeing them all come together. And I remember because I designed the Ant-Man design, I got to know Paul Rudd a little bit. So I remember he invited just to hang out in his trailer in between takes. So just being able
Is
to
he
like,
is he funny?
yeah, he's still funny. He is exactly how you see him in interviews, the most down to earth, the nicest guy in Hollywood. But being able to just be part of that and witnessing that, and then
Nice.
seeing and then knowing that Spider-Man's right there and Black Panther is going to be introduced as well. Like that was a nutty, crazy experience. Um, Thor Ragnarok, that one, getting to design Hela. Yeah, a lot of times for these movies, the characters I design and I lead these films, and then I'll go to the costume fittings. So being able to be part of that part of the process as well. Like on Ant-Man and the Wasp, I was intimately involved even in the build. After designing them, even in the build, so I was embedded in the costume department, flying back and forth to Atlanta, and I'd be
Mm.
working with the costume builders, the specialty builders, as well as doing the fittings. And we'd spend hours with Evangeline Lilly, Paul Rudd, trying fine tuning these costumes to get it to look just right. So that was a unique experience as well, being able to like really just fine tune their looks. Um,
That's probably my favorite costume, the
oh,
Ant-Man. Yeah.
oh, dude, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm completely, changed from before the
Yeah.
theater
Mhm. Yeah,
to
yeah.
after the theater. And now it's like, that's my favorite, as a costume, I think
Oh,
it really works. Yeah.
that's awesome. Thanks for saying that. It
Yeah.
means a lot because yeah, I spent so much, probably more time than any other costume on that one in particular, and working with the costume builders was such a great experience because like every line, like literally they're building it and they're like having me come over and they're asking me about every line in my, they're zooming into the concept design and I'm doing extra drawings over the, to clarify what's going on here. And they're like, do you really need this one line? And there's times when I'm like, yeah, because of this. And other times I'd actually say like, yeah, let's get rid of that line. But it was interesting that I was able to have that say because
I
at the end
mean,
of the day, we're gonna keep the design that Peyton Reed approved, but those
sure.
kind of level of intricate details, was entrusted.
I'm just curious because, like, you're coming from comics, like even like you said, you're drawing a lot of stuff on like naked bodies, basically,
Mhm.
because, it's just it's easier to draw, less time consuming. But, like, how did you actually learn? I mean, costume, if you're really talking to a costume maker, I mean, it's a very particular thing. I mean, just because you drew it doesn't necessarily mean it can be made.
Yeah,
Because I've done some stuff where people are like that's not possible. And yeah, can you learn a little
yeah.
bit about that? Did you have to like, learn about how clothes are made and stuff like that?
You know what? I tell me if you guys agree with this, but I feel like you will. So much of what we do, we learned on the fly. Like it's not like we went to school and there's a class on how to do XYZ, even down just to painting, down to design, but you're learning as you go just by doing. And of
Mm.
course, just like how we used to do master copies, you look at art books of like Rockwell or Leyendecker or whatever artist you love, you were doing that also with our peers, right? Like that's the great thing about working in film is I'm in a bullpen of like sometimes there were like 20 artists in there. Like you have guy like Phil Saunders who like I remember when I did my first Iron Man design on Iron Man 3, you know, but I'm not a hard surface guy. I'm more, clothing and characters, that kind of thing, creatures. So being able to pick his brain and also seeing his artwork and how he does it. And so there's a lot of that. And then, of course, research is probably the biggest thing, right? So when I'm doing an Iron Man design, what is Iron Man? Essentially, he's a Ferrari. You're wearing a Ferrari. So how much research I'm doing into car forms and all the different finishes and that kind of stuff. So, and then a lot of the Avengers characters, especially in the early days, are tactical, right? Because we're trying to get a little bit of that grounded feel. So, what's the first thing you do? What are real world applications? Just like what I mentioned about Ant-Man. It's this crazy looking character that can shrink down into a little ant size. So where's the reference for that? No, you think about the tech, the PIM technology, the 60s. So that's why I did a deep dive into astronauts, into machine parts during that time, scuba gear, all that stuff, because those are real parallel like applications of someone that has to be airtight, right? So it's a lot of that. So when you're doing the tactical stuff, you're doing a deep dive into tactical gear down to their belts, even down to the way it's made, the stitching, the double stitching to like reinforce. So it's a lot of that. But I think a lot of to be honest, the tone of the MCU really, really started from Ryan, right? So he really kind of set that groundwork of that science-based, the tactical, the grounded level. So yeah, so it's just kind of picking his brain, looking at his approach as well. But it is, to be honest, it is just kind of learning as you
Mm.
go. And then the part about the build is the part that was like, I've never built a costume for real. So when I'm dealing in the early days with costume designers, I can't tell them how to build it. So I could only tell them what I'm good at, which is being able to look at the overall. So when I would go to like costume fittings or whatever, I'll take photos. It's hard for me to say comments on the fly of like, oh, change this or this needs to be this or can we do this? But I can go back at a macro level, look at it and saying, oh, the shoulders are too narrow, the head is too big, or things that need to be improved to like, or the way that the lines line up. It's making him like kind of diminutive rather than broadening his shoulders, like the things that I know that will make a superhero a superhero,
Mm.
because it's a real challenge. It's one thing to draw a comic book and make it look heroic, but to get a real person with real proportions, even though these are actors that are ideal, they're still only like what, 6 heads tall. They're not the 8 heads tall of Linedecker, right? So it is challenging to, and every actor has different proportions. One thing you hear about actors all the time is they have big heads because they look great on camera. But as a superhero, when you see it in its totality, then it looks like bobblehead style, right? So how do you get someone to not look like that awkward, like, sometimes you see cosplayers, right? Even though they look great, but the one thing usually for cosplayers that you see that is off is the proportions. But it's because of the limitations of real, this is how big my head is, and to put on a helmet has to be this big. So that's why for the movie stuff, if it's a helmet, the one thing we learn how to do is to clamshell it, right? Because if you have to do this, you have to make it wide enough to come off, but to get as tight as possible, then you're gonna have to clamshell it. So it
I
is
was
learning as you go.
sorry. There's one point you mentioned actually about the camera, right? Like, I mean, you also probably need to understand how certain things will appear on camera versus like just in front of you when you look at it,
Yep,
right?
exactly. Exactly. That's why whenever I'm taking a photo of like a actor in a fitting, like it's never like the way we just take pictures of our each other because it's always just standing. But from this angle, it's always going to be like this is the anything. It's just gonna go away in perspective as you go lower to your feet. So you always have to go low, right?
Interesting. I mean, I kind of want to move into a bit of a retrospective view. Like, so I kind of get from our conversation here that, I don't know, like, whenever you kind of reached a certain milestone for yourself, you kind of look to the next thing, right? Like, oh, you have your dream of working in comics, but then you're like, oh, maybe I really want to try this, and then you've done this, and I want to really do into painting, or you want to do this, right? So I don't know. After all these years of doing that, after 15 years at Marvel, and after God knows how many years of you drawing and painting and doing art. Is there any next frontier that you're looking towards?
Oh, that's the big question, right? That's a tough question because I think yeah, throughout my career it's always been like I had a inkling of a desire for something, right? And it's kind of the curse of an artist, I would say. Is I always want to grow and I want to learn, which is a great thing, but I also see it as kind of a curse. It's a blessing because that's why you grow, right? Because it's when you just like rest on your laurels and just do what you know, that's when you actually diminish or will go down. But the curse is you'll never really be satisfied. But career-wise, I mean, this has been a dream job. So, um, I've been working for the past year, over a year on the next Avengers films. So that's a dream. But I think future stuff, I don't know. I don't have a clear picture of what future stuff is, but I do know one thing that I've always wanted to do, but not that I know exactly what that is something of my own, right? And I think every artist has that to whatever degree. It doesn't have to be, I need to make the next Avatar, right? But even if it's like my own comic book or my own whatever, like painting is still something that I'm pursuing, and I try to do it not as much as I like to, but I try to do on the side as much as I can because it's still something that traditional painting, I mean, that I want to continue to grow in. But I think it is some kind of project, and I don't, for me, it's like, I'm not thinking like, oh, it has to become a movie or animated film. I think just the act of creating something that's my own sounds like, and then I get to control it, like talk the control freak. Like ultimately you get to decide, You know, no one's telling you approved or not. I think something there.
Cool.
You
Sounds
guys
good.
probably have that too, right?
I think everybody has that, yeah, and
Yeah.
various I think degrees of like really wanting to make that happen, right?
It's the hardest thing though, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. There's
Yeah.
always like this like figure in your head like doubting, right? Like, but like you've never done this. Like, what do you know? Like, it's gonna be crap. What if nobody likes it, right?
You know what you just said right there? Right after I did Tomb Raider, I wanted to do my own creator-owned comic book. You know, that was like the dream. So I actually took like 6 months. I started writing in a coffee shop, and then I even started drawing my own book. And I finished the first issue, almost finished first issue. Right um, after that 6 months, I had that same thought you just had, like, wait, why should I have any confidence whatsoever that this is going to be any good? I've never written anything in my life. Like, I could be confident in the art, but it was really the story that I was like, I pulled out and I didn't pursue it. But
You still
I
have it in
think
a drawer somewhere, or what?
I do, but
Oh.
it's not good. I
Oh
like that
yeah.
recently. I like the drawings, but I'm like, the story is crap. But you know, at the end of the day, I think it's just the act of creating. So yeah, we can't expect it to become like the next Godfather or again the next Avatar, but just to I have so much respect for I know so many artists that have done that from comic books um, to other artists that have done their own thing, and some are smaller than others, some are a little bit more ambitious. Um, but whatever it is, if it's your own creation, like that's that's amazing, right? To see
But
it
isn't
through.
it? Yeah, but isn't it? I find it incredibly hard though, because, and especially hard because of the environment we work in. Like,
Hmm.
you work on some of the most expensive movies that have ever been made, right? And you're
Yeah.
used to working with like everybody at the top of their game, and the scope is always so big, and then suddenly you're making this little thing by yourself, and you're probably gonna, I don't know, like sell 100 copies, and suddenly like the scope and everything, like it's so tiny and so like,
Yeah.
and suddenly you become insecure. I don't know, like it's really weird, and you become disappointed that you can't pull off like this big thing you're used to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not delusional enough to think that, you know, it's ever gonna get close to a Marvel production. So I have that because there's no way I'm like, yeah, I can't, you know, everything that Marvel has going for it. I know that these movies are huge because they already have people, these characters are
Yeah.
beloved. If I create something, these are characters that no one has ever heard of before. So you're starting from the very ground up. But so starting with that expectation at least. But I don't know. Then it comes down to like what format do you want? What do you want to create? Do you want to create a comic book? Do you want to create a short? Like I know Emmanuel, you did a short, which is really cool. Do you want to try to make an animated thing? Like um, I don't know. It's and then the other part of it that gets challenging is like you want to, in order to, the bigger the scope gets, then like you need to partner with people, right? Like trying to do something by yourself. Oh my gosh, that's so hard. But then trying to even get somebody to collaborate with you, knowing all of our schedules are like impossible with all of our lives at our stage in life, and we have families and all that kind of stuff. That's why you end up just maybe in my mind start thinking, okay, then maybe it starts getting smaller again.
Mhm.
And then who, at least as a starting point, because I feel like, at least for me, like the bigger it gets, like I can be ambitious, like maybe here one day, but if I'm gonna start with something, it's got to be kind of smaller, doable, so that I could actually finish it, right? That's the hard part. So that's why even just doing paintings, like that's as small as you can get. Do your own paintings, you know, I don't know how you release it or whatever, or you sell original art, that kind of thing. But starting there, that's actually doing something, right? That's your own. And then, yeah, it is just trying to figure that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, I
if
mean,
we don't have that faith, I think, to put something out, like imagine if Jim Lee or Stan Lee never came up with certain characters or never really believed in themselves enough, or I don't know, you never know, maybe were just naive or just stupid enough to just like, hey, I'll just release it, I don't care, right? I'll just do it. Then we would never have this amazing legacy of stuff to look back on, right? So
Yeah,
maybe you should pull that thing out of your drawer and
yeah,
I
like
know.
release it.
put that out there.
I know, I know. It is the naivete of youth, right? But the older we
I know,
get,
right?
we like know
Oh
the
no,
realities,
I
and
know,
like
right?
we get
You
even
get
more
scared.
scared in a weird way. We're not as
Exactly.
gung ho.
All
More,
right. Well, I
more.
mean, I think we've definitely taken enough of your time, but it was really, really interesting. I mean, I could do this for like part two, because there's so much interesting stuff that just stories that you're telling that are interesting. But I want to be aware of the time for you.
Yeah, no, it's great. And Manuel, you are you a ping pong player?
Yeah.
Ah, I
Are
dabble.
you?
I dabble too.
Are you still playing?
No, because there's nowhere to play.
Well, we may be down in LA soon. I'll hit you up. We'll go play somewhere.
Yeah, 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 that'd be fun. That'd be fun. But not if you're like competing level. Are you that good? You can
He
I
compete.
is.
haven't
He
I
is
haven't
crazy.
Oh, you are? Okay, never mind. Never mind. I'm
I
still like
haven't played in a
recreational.
long time. I retired basically.
Oh,
I
the
retired,
fact that
but
you could say the word retired means that's how good you
exactly. He
are.
played on a national level here. Like
Oh, oh, okay. I
he's
didn't know
crazy.
Okay, never mind. I'll play with you.
Never
Just
mind.
fun. It's just games.
You can
Until
teach
it's
me.
not.
Yeah, you need to teach me.
Awesome. Okay,
Anyway,
great.
well,
I
thanks a
mean,
lot for
yes,
coming
thank you so
on. I
much.
really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, I think, and everybody's looking forward to the nenext Avengers, I think, and what Marvel's doing. So yeah, we'd love to
Yeah.
see whatever you're working on at the moment, even though we know it's gonna still take a little bit of time, but I think it's gonna be very soon. Anyway, thank you so much also to the audience for tuning in again, and see you guys in the next episode.
See ya.